Thank you very much, David, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. I'm Fabricio from Integer Research, and for this first presentation, I'd like to share some of our analysis within Integer on the global non-road mobile machinery markets. Integer has been doing research on vehicle, equipment, SCR, AdBlue for more than 10 years now, and in order to understand these markets, we have to go very specific into what is happening in every specific market in order to identify and analyze all global regional trends. So as this way. So as an introduction, we've got a suite of publications that covers the global SCR AdBlue markets. Some regional studies, including an European SCR and AdBlue forecast service. We also have a monthly newsletter called The Monitor that looks at Europe, North America, and Brazil, each region on a quarterly basis. And finally, we've got a study called Emissions Control in Non-Road Mobile Machinery Markets, from which I've taken most of the elements for this presentation today. Still as an introduction, this list shows all different categories of equipment shown in our report. We estimate we cover 90 to 95% of all equipment above 19 kilowatts sold globally. There's certainly some equipment below 19 kilowatts that is not captured, but most of these equipment, they're not covered by any emission standard either. So most of the regulated equipment is covered in our report. And in order to understand also all different usages of these equipment that exist in a very wide range of types and sizes and functions, we group them into 5 main industries. The most important ones are agriculture, the agriculture segment, materials handling, and construction. We also look at mining and forestry, but in these industries, the volumes are much less significant than for agriculture construction. So although it's a global report, although it's a global report, it's important, of course, to look at each region separately, because there are significant differences across regions in terms of market size, usage, equipment size, legislation. So this is our overview for each region. And what we can see in Europe is here, I'm sure what we could see in Europe last year, and it's not going to be much different from what we expect to see in the region over the next few years. Not much growth related to additional capacity, additional equipment infrastructure, but mainly replacement as the main driver for new equipment sales. And between segments, we'll see later on that for both agriculture and construction, growth in volumes is going to be relatively flat and not as significant than in other regions. But we still see construction in a slightly better position than agriculture, and bringing slightly higher marginal growth. So looking at some volumes, now this chart shows global non-road mobile machinery sales over the past 5 years, and then over the forecast period. What we can see that volumes have been decreasing year on year since 2013. But now figures have still remained relatively high, and we expect a gradual recovery and a slight increase in volumes over the next few years. We totaled nearly 3 million units sold last year, and this number is expected to grow to 3.5 million units per year in 10 years. If we look at Europe, the European volumes are likely to follow roughly a similar trend, although in percentage terms, the European market is going to grow less than other markets such as India and China. But we still forecast a similar trend for Europe, growing from 426,000 units in 2016 to above 470,000 units in 25-6. The growth is, we can see that there aren't any huge differences across segments. We expect both agricultural and construction equipment to develop at similar proportions. And that's mainly because we're going to see, this growth we're going to see is mainly going to be driven by replacement rather than investments in new machinery, as there are still credit shortages in the region. In terms of power bands, we can see that, and that's interesting because it's quite different from what happens in other regions. If you combine that 34 and 16, we see that half of the equipment sold in Europe is between 56 and 130 kilowatts. And that's mainly because, relatively speaking, the agricultural sector in Europe is sophisticated compared to other regions. And we're talking about farms that are on average higher and that have a higher degree of sophistication, of modernization, and although that varies quite significantly across different states. And these farms are directly related to the predominance of agricultural machinery above 56 kilowatts that we classify as medium heavy duty. And as you know, the 56 is the break point to the use of SCR in no-road mobile machinery. So moving to the regulatory side, there has been, as we can see, some harmonization among countries, with most markets either following or trying to align themselves with Europe or North America. And even between Europe and North America, there has been, there was a transition between 13 and 15, but now Tier 4 final and Stage 4 are very much comparable. And this level, degree of harmonization, as you know, is going to be less obvious in a couple of years' time when Europe implements Stage 5 and there's no concrete action from US and Canada to follow Stage 5, to change their current Tier 4 final. But then, and also I'm not going to talk too much about Stage 5 today because it is going to be discussed during the day in several presentations. Also worth noting the case about China here. China has been 2 steps behind Europe with their GB3 standards that are currently based on Stage 3A, and we understand that they are planning a jump to Stage 3B in a couple of years' time, but there are significant differences across cities. There are different standards for Beijing, for the other main cities, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and for the rest of the country. So and that creates the level of detail is quite significant, and it makes it difficult to talk too much further about harmonization in these markets. And then to follow this, how we like to look at how OEMs have coped and how OEMs have met these standards so far. When Europe implemented stage 3A, it was mainly AGCO bringing SCR equipped machinery, but then with 3B and 4, all the OEMs added SCR to meet the European standards. Now we see the large majority of manufacturers using SCR for equipment with a power band between 56 and 560 kilowatts, but there are still significant differences in the use of EGR, DPF, and DOC. Of course, the combination, the best, the after-treatment strategy depends on the manufacturer's choice, but also on the type, on the size of the equipment. So that's why we can see all those differences. And then when we look at stage 5, then we see much less differences, because pretty much everyone will need to bring SCR and DPF for these 56, 560 power bands. But then the main difference is which equipment would come with EGR, which equipment would come without EGR. So far we see more OEMs keeping EGR, but it is possible to see some of these OEMs switching to an SCR only strategy in order to favor fuel consumption. And then when we try to see, when we bring this to our global model and try to understand how to forecast the use of different after treatments, look at EGR first. What we can see is that there would still be an increase in the use of EGR in Europe and North America, and also in other Asian countries over the next few years. And then it's but the main for Asia, Europe, North America, it's mainly an incremental volume due to the market growth. But then it's in China that we see a more significant increase, and that's due to the implementation of 3B by 2020, which hasn't been fully confirmed yet. We also look at the use of DPF, and then it's mainly Europe adding more, having a higher share of equipment with DPF from 2019 onwards, and that's of course linked to the implementation of stage 5. And then for SCR, volumes are also expected to grow over these forecast periods, but then it's mainly Europe, North America, and some Asia countries, mainly Korea and Japan, and that's very unlikely to change. We don't see any of the emerging markets getting to the same levels as Europe and North America, with a few exceptions. Turkey is directly following Europe, and Turkey is also likely to have some SCR equipped machinery being implemented over the next few years. So when we combine this information in the forecast, we can also look at, sorry again. Yeah, and then this is our SCR sales forecast by industry. What we would expect is in Europe. So we can see already a first jump in 2015 with the implementation of stage 4 standards, and then with stage 5 in 2019, we expect that roughly 60 to 65% of the new equipment sales in Europe would be SCR equipped. When we combine this with the accumulated sales and the equipment population, we can also get to the SCR fleet in Europe and globally, and then to the AdBlue consumption. This chart shows the global AdBlue consumption by region, and because Europe and North America are the main markets with SCR equipped machinery, and also because these markets have been there for longer, we expect most of the AdBlue consumption in the non-road segment to take place in Europe and North America. Looking at the European numbers only, we expect these volumes to, the AdBlue requirements to grow over time as well. But of course, and then just to give we're saying roughly 500 million liters for 2016, which is, and then growing to 1.4, 1.5 billion liters in 10 years. And these, just to give an idea, the current market's somewhere between 2.5 and 3 billion liters for on roads in 2016. So we're talking about a segment that will not become the most important segment consuming AdBlue, but it would still be a sizable market, and logistics, the AdBlue supply chain will keep adapting to this market, because it's a market that works in a quite different way compared to trucks and buses and cars. And then, just to conclude, this is a chart where we look at different scenarios. In some regions, we have this high compliance scenario that assumes legislation would be implemented ahead of our base case, just to see the impact on AdBlue consumption. In other case, in Europe, we don't expect any. There aren't many uncertainties on the legislation implementation, but we look at a scenario where more EGR is used, less SCR, lower dosing rates, and also less. We also had hours of utilization for different equipments. And even in this low dosing scenario, we would still see a consumption developing from 0.4 to 1 billion liters per year. So it is a market that, even if things develop slower than they expected, we would still see a growth in that AdBlue consumption for the non-road markets. Great. That was it. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Right, questions from the floor, please. Okay.
Sorry? No, most of these numbers I showed are sales in each market. In the report, we look at production and sales, and then in some cases numbers are different for some regions. But these charts I've just shown, they were all sales, so equipment used in each market.
Okay. Any more? Was there one down there? No. I guess could I put a question then?
Yep.
I saw on your previous slide your last slide with technical data. You distinguish between high compliance rate and low dosing rate, which you attributed to EGR usage. Can you maybe expound on that? Because actually, we don't actually see that it's a matter of compliance. It's simply a matter of dosing rather than compliance.
Yeah, those scenarios, they're there for different reasons. It's not like an upside and a downside from like that change similar parameters. The high compliance scenario we have there is mainly to see what would happen in regions where legislation would happen when expected, but mainly because in for some regions, China, India, we also expect some legislations to be pushed back.
Right.
And that's why for the European case, the high compliance matches our base case. Mm-hmm. We don't expect stage 5 to be pushed back.
Okay.
The low dosing is more to see what would happen in cases where new equipment come in with a lower usage of SCR and AdBlue. So then we would see like the regional the first situation would be where equipment with more using more for those equipment with SCR and DGR, we would see the low dosing scenario looks at what would happen if some equipment comes with more with a higher EGR rate and then less SCR.
So really, you're not just it's not just one parameter which is being changed there. It's you have situations which will lead to high levels of dosing versus situations which will lead to low levels of dosing.
Yeah. Because basically, what happens is we have our base case.
Yes.
And the calculations in the base case, they assume a wide range of parameters, and then these scenarios are where there are more uncertainties and which parameters are more likely to change for some regions.
Okay, because it really is about much more than just EGR, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's much more than just about EGR. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Any more questions? We have 2 minutes. On one at the back there.
Yeah.
Do you expect any similar move in India?
Trying to remember. No. From what I can remember in India, there are talks now between government and OEMs to move to jump to direct stage 4. Sorry. But there isn't any concrete action so far.
But there's nothing official for China either, right? So it's not something for China, but there's nothing yet.
No, we haven't got the India. In the India slide, we have a base case that doesn't assume that does not assume stage 4 equivalent, and then we added the stage 4 situation in as the high compliance scenario. If they do a move to stage 4, I think it's by 2022, where talks are at the moment, but very likely the way things are now.
Okay.